My name is Richard Thompson. So today in this video, we're going to do a brief discussion or just overview of the French Revolution. So before we can really get into that, just a little bit of a brief background. So pre-1789, France is obviously a monarchy at this time. You have King Louis in power, and social conditions are less than stellar in France at this time. Um, you sort of have three classes or three levels of people. You have the monarch and then his noble class underneath him, and connected to that is sort of the clergy or the church, and then underneath all of that is the common people. And these common people really are the vast majority of French people. And along with being the vast majority are living in pretty extreme poverty at this time. Even what's the burgeoning middle class, so to speak, in France, they're living in pretty extreme poverty. They're called the middle class because well, they own property, they own their homes or their home slash place of business. Um, but that's about it. That's all they really have. They own their home, their farm, or whatever, and sort of the equipment that they need to get by to make their living. But as far as having a lot of possessions, that aren't basic necessities, and even basic necessities, they don't have a lot of that stuff. They don't have a closet full of clothes, things like that. They're living pretty bad off, and on top of that, they're paying huge amount of taxes to the clergy and the nobility and the monarchy. And they're seeing these people have tons of money, tons of wealth, tons of possessions. Well, they're not really seeing any of the benefits of these taxes. What is the benefit for them to be paying these taxes? Society's not really getting anything. So King Louis, he is not ignorant to these calls for political reform, and he does try to do something, try to push some of the reforms through. He's just not really getting any help from Parliament or anything like that. Because while he sees that he needs to do these kind of minimal things in order to gain his power, the Parliament's just not really, or to keep his power, I should say, the Parliament's not really helping out, and so he's forced to call the Estates General, which hasn't met since 1641, and this is 1789, so quite a long time. Um, and it's made up of the three estates, the first and second being nobility and clergy, and the third being the common French people, or the sans-culottes. And immediately, this is May 1789. Immediately, these people say, okay, something's got to change before we even get going, because we vastly outnumber first and second estate. Yet we have the least amount of representation, the least amount of power, least voting rights, all that stuff. So they said we got to change something. Of course, the first and second estate just don't go along with this. So third estate says, all right, fine, we're going to go ahead and form the National Assembly, and you can join us or not. And so at this point, we're basically at revolution. We're pushing for a new form of government. So June 13th, we see a popular uprising where a monastery that is known for holding grain is attacked, and then the next day, more popular uprising, and this day is now worldwide known, Bastille Day, because the Bastille prison in Paris is, um, falls to this mass uprising of common people armed with picks and sticks and things like that. Um, just kind of homemade weapons taking on the soldiers of the National Army, and they take over the Bastille. And, the king, seemingly ignorant in his palace, he's also making some changes and firing political appointees, and there's sort of these kind of conspiracy things going on. So again, we're in a pretty much full state of revolution. You're having, massive criticisms in the public, in symbolisms and things like that, just massive criticism of what's going on. And so this revolution seems to be in pretty full swing. And the National Assembly comes together, and, again, they are heavily influenced by the Enlightenment ideals. And so we see this Declaration of the Rights of Man being written out, and this new constitution being written out in France. And again, these are all Enlightenment ideals being put into place here in France. Um, Things don't really work out so well. Uh, the king, though he says, okay, I'm going to do these things, he is plotting how to get out of it. And so, on June 20th, the king decides that he's going to escape with his family out of out of his palace, and he wants to meet up with his allies in order to take down the revolution. Excuse me. So obviously this doesn't get isn't very good um, for the French people, seeing as in it's only June 20th, 1791, just 2 years, and the king's already trying to take away what we've gained. He's trying to fully restore his power. So there is a trial. We see Bertrand Barré, who's the president of the National Assembly. He writes in his memoirs that he at one point had a lot of respect for the king, and now he doesn't necessarily like the way the king is being treated. But this is what has to be done. We're in a time of revolution, and things need to change, and the monarch unfortunately isn't going with it. So he is found guilty, and King Louis is beheaded. And shortly afterwards, his wife will be beheaded, and so there no longer is a monarchy, and we have a full, new form of government, and we see the rise of Robespierre and the Committee of Public Safety, and this is this 2 year period of what is known as the Terror. During this period, Robespierre and the Committee of Public Safety round up anybody that they deem as anti-revolutionary, someone who's dangerous to the revolution, um, and there's tons of beheadings, just thousands of people killed every single day because someone has decided that they are an anti-revolutionary, and even the flimsiest of evidence, a lot of people are put to death for little minor things because if we look back at the memoirs of people like Ratif and Menetra, we see that they're confused. They don't know who's in charge. They don't know who to trust. They don't know who is going to turn them in if they do something that is, they might not think is anti-revolutionary. It might just be a normal activity, but maybe somebody else is going to report them for it and say, well, you're an anti-revolutionary. So there's a lot of confusion, and it's not just about who to trust. It's about where is as Hunt says, where is the center of society. The symbols are changing. We no longer have a king. We have all these different people. Robespierre's trying to get rid of the church altogether and have this cult of the supreme being, as he talks about. Days of the week are different. The months are all different names. The way they're laid out, it's this whole new based on 10 system. Very confusing time. But again, this period only lasts for 2 years because Robespierre himself is beheaded because he is too dangerous. He's too, he's gotten out of control, and people are just not really enjoying the terror, obviously. So he himself is put to death, and the National Assembly shortly after is gives way for this new sort of directory form of government. So there's these 5 directors, and they rely on a lot of military strength and a lot of military power and authoritarian power, just central power. A lot of these people were royalists before, um, and so we see military leaders sort of growing. One of those people being Napoleon Bonaparte. He was not actually someone that is you would immediately think of as an emperor. He didn't rise extremely rapidly through the ranks, but he rose steadily, and as he got more and more command, he gained more and more respect, and he was seen as something of a military genius, and somebody who knew who to align himself with. And to that end, by 1795, Bonaparte is allied with one of the directors who completely wants to get rid of the Constitution. And he's part of this coup d'état, and he burst into the chambers, and he's nearly found out. But he is promoted. He is given the rank of first consul of 3. This is sort of an old Roman idea, and he builds up. He just keeps building his power using a lot of propaganda and things like that. So by 1799, Napoleon is the emperor of France, and sort of like the 1800s, we see, even though there's still some debate about it, this is sort of considered the end of the revolution because Napoleon is an emperor. There's no constitution, there's nothing like that, and we have these Napoleonic codes that are put in place in France and within the empire that are pretty strict, and a lot of people would say that um, he really rolled back a lot of rights that were gained during the revolution, like women. The few rights that they did gain, they were gone. um, but at the same time, he did keep a lot of things, and abroad he sort of had a big impact, because when he conquered a place, he considered himself something of a Alexander the Great type of person, and so when he conquered a country or an area, he sort of, he wanted the people to be happy that they were conquered, essentially. So he gave them rights that a lot of them didn't have. So you could say some of these ideals of the revolution were still being spread, um, even though they weren't necessarily in France at the time. And also, he sort of gave rise to some different ideas as well that we could say had a huge effect on Europe much later. After Napoleon's fall, because eventually, he is taken down and he's exiled, comes back, and then exiled again. So he sort of helped push this idea of national pride and nationalism that we see, because he definitely wanted his military men to have this strong sense of pride in the fact that they were Frenchmen fighting for France, and it was the same thing in the countries he conquered. He wanted he wanted a lot of people to be prideful about what they were in. Um, so it's sort of as Hunt says, and there's always something unaccounted for in the French Revolution. So it's kind of hard to say where it ends, but you could definitely say that by the time Napoleon comes in, the revolution is not the same as when it started. Thank you.